The end is near, or is it? Boris Johnson's got the deal, Parliament's got the votes, and with trust in short supply between the two, well, the Speaker of the House of Commons this Monday telling the Prime Minister to first pass all the legislation he needs for an orderly departure from the European Union before any straight up or down vote on the divorce deal that Johnson's brought back from Brussels. Going into Parliament's first Saturday session since the Falklands War, the Prime Minister had hoped for a speedy approval of his agreement. His rivals, though, don't want to give back control of the agenda till they're certain to avoid a no-deal crash-out on the 31st of October. Does Johnson have the votes? Will Tuesday be the day? Will it be later? We'll also be asking our panel about the opposition's bid to rally Remainers and soft Brexiters to force a referendum on the final deal. And as last Saturday's mass demonstrations in London show, we'll weigh just how determined and or how weary public opinion is on both sides of the channel. Yeah, there's Europe's next move. Will leaders easily grant an extension? What are the costs of yet more prolonged uncertainty as weighed against the cost of a no-deal Brexit? How long will this saga run? Today in the France 24 debate, Brexit can wait. And joining us from London, Rebecca Vincenzi. She's member of Labour International. Thank you for being with us.
Hi.
Joining us here in the studio, Hélène Conway-Mouret, Vice President of the French Senate, who hails from the Socialist Party. How are you?
Hello.
Welcome back. Welcome back as well to Nino Galetti, Paris Director of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation think tank.
Good evening.
Welcome to the show again. The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yeah, no meaningful vote this Monday, so says the Speaker of Parliament.
My ruling is therefore that the motion will not be debated today, as it would be repetitive and disorderly to do so. For the benefit of colleagues not closely familiar with the so-called same question convention, which is very strong and dates back to 1604, I will summarise the rationale for it in a sentence. It is a necessary rule to ensure the sensible use of the House's time and proper respect for the decisions that it takes.
And in Conway, that reference to 1604 can seem quaint, but it's also a reminder, isn't it, that this is a struggle between rival institutions over who's got the power at this crucial juncture.
Absolutely. I think we see a parliament which is, to us, a model of, parliamentary democracy, and it is an old one, as we are just reminded, trying to take back control over prime ministers, Theresa May and Boris Johnson, now behaving in the same manner. Previously, Theresa May tried to push a kind of wrapped up package to the House of Commons without consultation, without getting the MPs on board, negotiating quite alone, really. And now we have Boris Johnson not respecting the law, trying to set aside the Parliament by putting it on extended holidays while he would be negotiating, and all of that not following the rules that are there. And
but
I think we're just trying to see,
he's been thwarted on that, and now
absolutely.
And now he has, as ordered by Parliament, sent a letter to Brussels saying we'll need a delay.
But he knows the rules very well. Why did he present the same text a second time, knowing very well that it was going to be rejected? He knows the rules, but he's just trying to push the limits all the time and try to, get through. But he's being reminded that there is a law, and Parliament is the one that should make it applied. So I think what we see is just Parliament trying to take back control and trying to make a final decision on it when it is ready to do so.
When you look at Boris Johnson trying to introduce on Monday the bill that was rejected this past Saturday, are you thinking, there's some shrewd politicking with an eye to a general election, some savvy politics, or are you thinking this guy's wasting Europe's time?
Well, I wouldn't say that he's wasting Europe's time, because we have to find a solution all together, and it's hard work, and we want to work on this no doubt about this. On the same time, one can observe that Boris Johnson is a gambler, a kind of gambler, and he's doing his plays with the Parliament, with the British Parliament. I think it's good the British Parliament has taken control over all this. It's quite late, but they did it. And so I see a lack of confidence by Boris Johnson. How can we trust him after all what we have seen?
Rebecca Vincenzi, on Saturday, we saw the man who sponsored that bill that makes sure that the Parliament avoids a no-deal crash out from the European Union say, my job is done now. I'm going to vote for this deal now. What was your reaction when you heard Oliver Letwin speak?
Well, he's trying to avoid also a no deal, the dangers of a no deal Brexit by doing this so that and allow for scrutiny. But I think people in the country are just sick and tired. It's been 3 years of the Conservative Party putting forward pretty much the same deal every time, coming back with the same deal. And it's not a deal that respects workers' rights. It's not a deal that respects food controls. It's not a deal that respects the environmental crisis, because it doesn't even have a limit to the pollutions that corporations can emit. I think it's a reckless deal, and I don't see why we should be blackmailed into voting for something that is not changed for 3 years. It's been the same deal, and people are sick and tired. There's 4 million children who are living in of poverty and austerity in Britain.
It's not the same deal,
this is distracting us.
It's not the same deal.
Three-quarters of it is the same deal as Theresa May's. It's, in fact, for the Labour Party, it's a worse deal, and we cannot vote for it. So what we will do is we want to put it to a people's vote, so the people have a say in when they did the referendum back in 2016. There was no way that people voted for this, a deal that destroys our rights. It causes us to have chlorinated chicken and rat fur in our food.
All right, we're going to turn to Stephen Canning, who joins us from London. Stephen Canning, a former advisor to the Conservative Party. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. As you understand it, first of all, when is the big vote finally at this hour as we speak?
So as I understand it, after the Speaker took the quite surprising decision, I think, today to not allow a meaningful vote, I believe the bill is going to be published by the Prime Minister at some point this evening, and there'll be 2 big votes on that tomorrow.
2 big votes on that tomorrow? Are you saying that it could all be approved by the end of Tuesday?
I mean, the hope is, so the Prime Minister will publish his withdrawal bill tonight, so we'll finally get to see the full text of that and what that looks like, and hopefully that will be put before the House tomorrow for a vote. If that goes through, there's a series of other votes that would have to take place this week as well. But it is possible, if members of Parliament do back his withdrawal bill tomorrow, that we could still have a deal by the end of this week.
So why didn't he just try to pass the articles of legislation straight away before the overall deal, the so-called meaningful vote, since he knew it would be rejected?
I think, I'm not sure he realised it would be rejected. Personally, I don't agree that it should have been rejected. It was rejected by the Speaker on the grounds, as we know, that you can't ask members of Parliament the same question more than once in a session. And frankly, the Prime Minister made the argument that actually the question wasn't asked. He withdrew the question on Saturday before members of Parliament had a chance to vote on it. They merely voted on the Letwin amendment. Therefore, I think it caught him slightly by surprise that he wasn't able to put it forward again today.
Various polling institutes show more people back Boris Johnson's deal than rejected. Now, most of that polling done in the aftermath of Thursday. Analysts, though, keen to point out that many are undecided. They don't have more than 50%. It's not an overall majority as of those polls taken late last week. They simply don't have enough information to form an opinion. Hélène Conway-Mouret, it's more than 600 pages. Who reads more than 600 pages?
Well, not in a very short time, the way, these kind of agreements and texts are being presented to members of parliament. But I was in London up to last Monday, and what I saw, I met a lot of friends there, and I think people are very weary at this point. And Boris Johnson's style of pushing, having no limits, somehow frightens some people who feel that, he did blackmail the British people by saying, well, we will get out without an agreement. And I think that has kind of pushed some people to kind
they
of
said he
feel,
couldn't get a deal out of Brussels, and he did get a new
but he
deal.
did. Of course
And
he
it
did.
does, and there is
And now I
significant change
think
when it comes, most
it's
notably, the question of Northern Ireland.
dawned on him that getting out with a no deal will actually be extremely bad for Britain, as much as it will be bad for all of us. And I think we fully agree on that point. And that therefore he has kind of pushed, I think, to get those that may be indecisive or those that want a second referendum to kind of feel, well, if we are to leave without a deal, it may be better to actually vote for the deal that is on the table and be done with it. And I think that's the game that he has been playing for the past few weeks. He's also playing, of course, for his own personal career. He wanted to go for an election. He's pushed that. Then he found himself into an impasse because the Labour Party and the opposition didn't grant him that. So now that he's cornered, he has to get that deal passed so that he can go to a general election having been the overall winner, getting Britain out, which is what a lot of people still want, but with the deal, reassuring the others who wanted to remain, and then try to negotiate the best possible free trade agreement, given that Mr. Barnier has kind of said, now we need to work on that.
Is that agreement the least worst scenario, Nino Galletti?
Well, if I understood well, Rebecca wants to have a new referendum. I'm wondering if this referendum would really change anything, because as we have seen in the polling institutes, there's no new majority in the British people. So we have not...
Well, not a decisive one. You might get 52% one way and 48% the other?
That's it. That's it correctly. So that wouldn't change anything. And if you look in history, there has never been a huge majority for the membership in the European Union in United Kingdom. So Britain always was an island, and you can explain it geographically. They are not the continent, so they want to have a special role. And I think that's the problem. We have to manage it. Now they have decided Brexit, so it's Brexit, so we have to find a solution. If we would have a new referendum, and even if this referendum would be a referendum by 52 to 48%, you would have the same situation in Great Britain like now.
All right, and the message from France has been often from the French president, let's just move on. How much of a delay? The reaction seems to be the same from Germany as well.
Should there be problems in Britain, I would not rule out that there could be a short technical extension. That's if there isn't a majority in the British lower house.
Nino Galletti, is there the sense in Germany, like we've heard Emmanuel Macron saying, look, let's just move on now at this point?
Well, in Germany, I think we want to avoid a no deal overall. But we also want to avoid a non-structured deal or a non-structured Brexit. We don't like improvisation. We like to have a regulation. And so Germany wants to give more time to Britain.
Wants to give more time to Britain. What is more time? How much more time?
I don't know. I'm not a partner of the government, but I think they are more tolerant than French policy is towards London.
Do you agree with that, Hélène Conway-Mouret?
Well, it's been 3 years, and the question is how many more months, how many more years to, we are all at a standstill I mean, every day we're following the Brexit. It's like Dallas, the new Dallas, except we don't know who is going to be murdered or die in the end, and if somebody is going to die. But it's a very bad series that we have to go through, and politically, it is getting the EU into a kind of paralyzed state, because we have had an election, a European election, with British members of Parliament, of the European Parliament, not sitting. We don't know, how to go ahead with the appointment of the commissioners. Should Britain play a role? Will they stay? Will they leave? But I do think that now there is a sense that, yes, they are going to leave, but in what fashion? And what will be then the next step in the negotiations to ensure that we have the strongest relationship with Britain, that we retain somehow, the trade deals that we have. I mean, from a commercial point of view, I realize why Germany would be very reluctant to see a kind of a rushed deal, because Germany has so many ties, commercial ties with Britain, that it needs to be secured in not seeing a collapse of all of that. So, but at the same time...
And it's not the same with France?
No, well, the commercial ties are important, but more is at stake for Germany than it is for France. However, I think what President Macron is talking about is kind of a certain impatience to say, well, look, we have realized that you won't get out, but, don't mess us around anymore. Let's get on with it, and, and we will see what we can do. France is working really hard at ensuring that whenever Brexit is done, that, new treaties will be signed quite rapidly, certainly from the defense and security issues. This is really, really important to us all, but for everything else. And now, it was quite interesting what the Labour representative said. They don't want food, coming, not using EU regulations and so on. They're starting to realize that the EU was protecting both workers and the population, that the EU rules and regulations may be strong and may be hard, but they were to protect our own health,
What kind of regulations going forward? We're going to pick up on that point later when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate, and we're waiting on Brexit. A bit like if it was a play by Jean-Pierre Jeunet. We're talking about it with Stephen Canning, former advisor to the Conservative Party, who is with us from London. Welcome back as well to Rebecca Vicenzi, member of Labour International, who's also in the UK capital. French Senator Hélène Conway-Mouret is with us, as well as is Nino Galetti of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Get on with it is the feeling of many of you were saying just before the break. It's also a feeling that is being felt in the UK. A report by partner station France 2, read by Luc Schrago.
The headlines in British newspapers need little explanation. Confusion writ large across their pages as it looms in the minds of many ordinary Brits. Even the government's response to the European Union seemed two-pronged. Of letters sent to Brussels, one requesting a Brexit extension unsigned, the other calling it undesirable, definitively from the Prime Minister himself. Well over 3 years into its Brexit saga, the country has had enough.
I don't understand. It's confusing. It's frustrating.
He's playing games. Absolutely playing games. He's playing games with our future.
In fact, the longer the situation endures, the less it seems the British care anymore. At one pub in the capital, locals were happy to talk about almost anything else.
I'm not interested in negativity. Right. And in my opinion, whatever happens, happens, and we'll deal with it, and the world will go on.
Every day there's something new. 1 minute they say this, next minute they say this. Yeah, Boris Johnson, he's like a TV show every day.
3 years, and the political uncertainty has even drifted into British media, with old hands often at a loss to explain it.
And welcome to the BBC News at 1, live from Westminster. Quite frankly, very few people know what's going on.
In the coming weeks, is the Prime Minister going to get a deal with the EU? Don't know.
It's gotten to such a point now that Brits are simply tuning out. leading one network to offer an alternative.
Good afternoon, this is Sky News, Brexit free.
The pop-up channel went live last week and carries everything but news of the elephant in the room. It's early days, so it's not yet known exactly who's watching, though there's certainly an audience. According to a recent survey, people are increasingly switching off because of Brexit.
Rebecca Vincenzi, will you be tuning in to Brexit-free Sky News?
Well, I agree with a lot of the people there that is just dragging on. And Boris Johnson said at the time of the referendum that it would be really easy to get a deal. But it's turning out that 40 years of work with the EU, of having good food laws, good environmental laws, good working laws. That's 40 years of work. You can't just unravel it by petulantly insisting on it being done in 2 days.
But as you saw in that report, people are beginning to tune out, they say. Do you agree with that?
I understand why they're beginning to tune out, because it's the government has kept it dragging on. And I think there's a lot of other issues the British people want to deal with, and the concerns of the young people in Britain with the climate change, and the most young people are overwhelmingly against leaving the EU. I think these are the concerns that really people want to focus on now. So bringing the same deal back again to Parliament is really pushing it. It's been 3 years of this.
Stephen Canning, how different a deal is this one?
I think in a lot of ways it's a very similar deal. You know, Theresa May's deal nearly got through last time. It wasn't far off. And I think this has refined some of the bits, most notably around Northern Ireland. And, you know, it's clear that Boris Johnson has done very well here. He was able to bring the DUP alongside him, whilst also bringing the ERG, or as they call themselves, the Spartans, who were the sort of the last holdouts against the deal. So I think it's a very, very similar deal in many ways, but it refines the bits that people struggled with Theresa May's deal. And the thing I think we're also forgetting while we're having this talk, the debates in Parliament, whilst yes, might have to take place over the course of 2 days, are not trying to hash out all the details over 2 days. The details have been sorted. Like we say, this is very similar to the previous deal. This is 3 years' worth of work and a bit more that's gone on since Boris has taken over in this deal. The deal is not being refined over 2 days. The deal has been refined over the course of 3 years.
Stephen Canning, let's listen to the shadow Brexit secretary, because on the one hand, there's the fatigue that we just saw in that report. On the other hand, there's what Hélène Conway-Mouret was talking about just before the break, which is those that are reacting against the Tory promise of a, quote, Singapore-on-Thames free trade future for post-Brexit Britain.
Once you've moved out of alignment, you don't move back. And the further you move out, the less easy it is to trade with the EU 27. And once you've done that, you've broken the economic model we've been operating for decades. And once you've done that, you look elsewhere. And once you've done that, you look across to the United States. I will finish this point and then I'll give way. The gaze goes across to the US, and that's a different economic model.
So, Stephen Canning, chlorinated chicken, here we come.
Well, again, this is one of the points, and I've heard chlorinated chicken has once again come up in this discussion. It's not part of the deal whether we accept or don't accept chlorinated chicken. Once we leave the European Union, it will remain, as it has always remained, up to DEFRA, our Department of Farming and Rural Affairs, to decide regulations on food. In fact, the deal negotiated, if we did negotiate a free trade deal with the United States, it wouldn't be even be able to possible for them to change our current regulations on allowing things like chlorinated chicken without it going through the Department of Farming and Rural Affairs, which has already said that it has no interest in doing so. So it's one of the many issues that's used as a misnomer in this debate and in the Brexit debate to confuse people and take away from the point.
You heard
by leaving the European Union on the 31st, let me just bring allowing chlorinated chicken in.
Well, let me just bring in Nino Galletti on this. You heard Rebecca Vincenzi on this. You've heard Stephen Canning on this. Are standards going to slip in the UK?
Well, I don't understand. I agree with Rebecca that people want have other problems than the Brexit. They want other solutions for their all-day life. But why doesn't Labour use this topic for their campaign? So that would be the moment to say Labour is the Remain party, but they they didn't do it until now. And I think, well, the reason is that Labour isn't a pro-EU party, and that's the problem.
Labour's not a pro-EU party.
I don't think so, because why don't they started a campaign on this topic? If the if the Remainers are so strong, so Labour would have a good chance to use that now.
Yeah, Rebecca Vincenzi, that's the argument that's been leveled at the party leader, Jeremy Corbyn, that he equivocates too much, that he cares too much about those Labour constituencies that voted for Brexit, and that he's ambiguous and that he is not clearly enough in favour of Remain.
I think that I disagree. I think Labour has always been openly a Remain party. They campaigned for Remain, and Jeremy Corbyn is a very democratic person who has respected that decision. It's a democratic decision.
But I think you can tell it's clearly not his position.
He's a very democratic leader, and I think what he is worried about most of all is the toxic effect of this referendum on our community in the United Kingdom. We have Scotland did not want to leave. We have Northern Ireland do not want to have their border. We have so many toxic problems caused by this whole referendum that the Labour Party want to heal, and I really don't see that Boris Johnson's promises that this deal will heal the situation is believable.
We're heading towards general elections sooner rather than later, and in Conway Mouret, are you making sense of what's going on politically in the UK? Which party stands for what?
At the moment, what we can make sense of is that Boris Johnson is playing his own future career as, wanting to remain the Prime Minister of Britain and therefore wanting to be the one that passed the Brexit and so on. I think what this referendum has done is that it has divided families, it has divided political parties today that need to reunite and find kind of a clear lines, political lines. And I think that the Conservative Party is as divided as the Labour Party on that issue. As much as I've seen some of my British friends' families being divided between couples, with massive arguments on this issue. So I think it will take some time, but Boris Johnson will go into a general election having done, finished the Brexit. And then, of course, the British people will maybe start waking up with all that they had to lose by leaving the European Union, which was never really explained to them in the first campaign. David Cameron never talked about the problem with Northern Ireland or Scotland and the threat to the kingdom. He never talked about the 700 agreements that had been passed over 4 decades with the EU and the protection that it provided to its people and its population. None of that was ever discussed and presented. So now, it's saying that maybe indeed the British people will be able to protect their food and whatever in the trade agreements. But what weight will Britain have when negotiating with China or the United States?
So what do you see as the future? Is there going to be, in the end, alignment between Britain and the rest of the EU?
I think, in having a free trade agreement with the EU, they will have, of course, to comply with EU regulations, which would bring that protection. But when negotiating with the United States or China, I'm not too sure that they will have the proper strength and weight in that negotiation to apply or get their partners to apply the rules that they want, and they will have to abide by theirs. That's what I'm afraid of for them.
So will it be a UK all on its own, or a UK that, effectively aligns itself with Europe, like Switzerland does, like Norway does to a certain extent?
Well, United Kingdom isn't Switzerland and isn't Norway. It's an important country, and I think, as I mentioned before, which Prime Minister Boris Johnson is constructing now is not really confidence. And if you want to have a structured cooperation in the future, you have to build up confidence now. But how can we trust Boris Johnson if we see what he's doing in Great Britain?
Stephen Canning, what is the future relationship between the UK and Europe?
And I think if you read the letter that the Prime Minister added to the extension request letter that he sent last night, you'll see he pointed out that he wants to see Britain and European Union maintain a very strong, very close relationship. He sees us as partners, as people that can stay working together, that can stay aligned in many areas, but that perhaps in other areas drift and try different things. This often is being framed by people as an antagonistic decision and a chance for us to fight off against each other. That's not what this is. This is about the UK deciding it wants a slightly different journey to the European Union, but it can still work quite closely. And I see no reason after October the 31st why our relationship with the European Union doesn't get stronger and closer.
So stronger and closer, in other words, it'll be a close relationship just without all the voting rights that the UK currently enjoys.
Well, it will be a close relationship where the United Kingdom gets to decide when it aligns itself and gets to negotiate when it wants to align itself, rather than being dictated to when it has to align itself. And I think that's what all along the British people wanted. They've never said we want to lower our standards on X goods or lower our standards on this. What they've said is they want the option to decide the future of the United Kingdom purely in the United Kingdom, and they want the United Kingdom's Parliament to be supreme.
Hélène Conway-Mouret?
I think the British Parliament, as much as the French or the Bundestag, was always free to decide. I really don't see the advantages. I mean, Britain had a lot of opt-outs. Now it is going to work the other way around and look for opt-ins without having the advantages that it had in terms of grants, in terms of support, in terms of exchanges, in terms of that freedom of exchanges. So, but maybe that is what the British people wanted. Their vote has to be respected. But we need just to tell our British friends that, yes, we're prepared. I am speaking for France, but I'm sure that, the same applies to Germany, that we are working hard to ensure that indeed the best possible relationship will continue with them. But we're all very sad to have been following this saga for the past 3 years, and it's not giving a very good image of the political world, and that I'm not happy with at all.
This saga is running, and it's running too long for many. It does eclipse other problems, particularly within the Franco-German couple right now, and in particular with the road ahead for the new European Commission, what with the French pick being rejected by the European Parliament. The fact that we're instead talking about Brexit, is that a good thing, Nino Galetti, that we're not talking about Sylvie Goulard being rejected?
Well, we should also talk about European future, that's clear. But this week it's Brexit, that's for sure. And at the same time in Brussels, the new commission is built. And I think we will soon have a new commission.
Soon have a new commission. And without the UK, what kind of an Emmanuel Macron can we expect? What kind of an Angela Merkel can we expect?
Well, we are sad that Britain won't be in this group anymore. And if you have seen these images you've shown recently, you saw British Prime Minister passing by all the leaders of the European Union. So I think it's a real disadvantage for Great Britain that they won't have twice a month, 3 times a month, the possibility to join all these European leaders. But okay, it's up to British people. Now,
yeah, I was going to ask Hélène Conway-Mouret. Emmanuel Macron has been sort of angling himself to be King of Europe for the time being. With the departure of Britain, does that mean France's role is even more outsized?
Shouldn't be seen this way, really. I think France has always tried to articulate a vision for Europe, has been, country founding fathers and trying to bring this union together. And I think what Emmanuel Macron is trying to do in a lot of speeches and articles that he publishes and so on across Europe is to try to create this desire for Europe and feeling that, yes, as a bloc, as a continent, we represent something in the world, given that there is a kind of, a new world order, and major shifts at the moment.
But would you see, for instance, the rejection of Sylvie Goulard's nomination also as a sign to France, hey, look, Britain's leaving, there isn't that counterweight anymore, but don't be too... Don't be bigger than your britches.
I know it was everything goes back to him, but she was the wrong candidate. That's what I think, and for many reasons, and not from the point of view of her competences, which nobody questioned. But I think the Parliament played its role. There are some ethical rules that are there that were applied, and I personally go with them, and I feel it shows that democracy is there and alive within the European Parliament, and that is good. It is reassuring. So I have no problem with that. But it's not just a rejection of Emmanuel Macron. Indeed, he pushed that candidate. It should have been another one. And that candidate will now be in place. So there will be another candidate, and that will be sorted out. But not everything has to be coming back to the president.
Right. Democracy certainly alive, as you say, in London, and we'll be watching what happens over the coming days. I want to thank Stephen Canning and Rebecca Vincenza for joining us from the UK capital. I want to thank Hélène Conway-Mouret and Nino Galletti. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
So it's great. We don't know anything. Or it's terrible. Which is it, great or terrible?
I think it's probably pretty terrible because we can't even make an educated guess right now as to what's going to come next.
When is the meaningful vote?
Exactly.
We don't know.
Nobody knows anything. The cartoonists are still having plenty of fun because this is certainly lots of fodder for them. Christian Adams in the Evening Standard has come up with this one because, of course, Boris Johnson famously said he would rather die in a ditch than not have the UK leave the European Union on the 31st of October. And you'll notice this one's titled In a Ditch, and Boris Johnson is being buried by all of the legal and parliamentary losses that he's suffered, basically, which are thwarting so far his bid to leave on the 31st. But who knows whether he will manage that somehow or not. We will see. Plantu, the French cartoonist, has also done his take on this one, saying that this was entitled The Risky Strategies of Boris Johnson. And you can see the arrows heading off in all kinds of directions. Not the most flattering portrait of the leader of the United Kingdom right now. Also France Info talking about the fact that people basically in the UK have had enough. They are fed up, ras le bol. And they talk a lot, in fact, about the way the media is affecting people's morale. They talk about lunacy, madhouse, declare the newspapers. They also say that a third of people claim they no longer watch the TV news. And they have a quotation from someone saying, "It doesn't interest me anymore. There's too much negativity." Quite what there is to be positive about, well, that depends on your political standing, I suppose. This came out from the Conservative Party earlier on today, and clearly they are banking on people just accepting that we should just get this done. Get Brexit done has been a popular hashtag for quite some time now, and they tweeted these words with it. Come together, back the New Deal, get Brexit done, move on as a country. But this is just one step. We have so much further to go. Right. And it kind of feels a little bit like they're going for a sort of a Nike-style ad slogan, just do it was Nike's slogan. It doesn't really work when it comes to politics that's actually going to have huge influence on people's lives. The New York Times, interestingly, is looking at the dangers, really, of Brexit fatigue in this particular article. And they say it really could be one of the biggest problems. The decision will affect Britain for generations, they say. All the delays and debates, however acutely frustrating, are better than a rushed or questionable exit. Decisions taken in the coming days must not be a surrender to Brexit fatigue on either side. Too much is at stake and too much more lies ahead. Now, they get it, even if certain people within the UK establishment do not. But there are signs of Brexit fatigue absolutely everywhere. The Guardian newspaper is not somewhere that you would expect to have a particularly pro-Brexit standpoint, but this piece from Simon Jenkins, he is suggesting a rather odd turnaround from Boris Johnson, which I think is highly unlikely, that he reinstates the customs union into the withdrawal agreement. So that's fairly unlikely. But what interested me was the language he used here. The deal available is serviceable for withdrawal on the 31st of October. It should be passed and the nation put out of its misery. That sounds really quite sinister, but anyway. It would be greeted by the British public with a shout of relief, audible the length and breadth of the land. Now, we saw 2 million people out on the streets of London saying, no, this is not what they want. And I think the idea that people will be relieved, yes, on one side they'll be very happy, but on the other, they certainly won't be.
You understand that point of view by Simon Jenkins in The Guardian?
Yeah. Unfortunately.
It is interesting, though, how even those that you would expect to be arguing against it are starting to give up. 20 Minutes, which is a French publication, has this piece which starts with the line, France would like to be finished with Brexit. And unfortunately, there are an awful lot of people, I think, who would agree, but it's not as simple as that.
Not as simple as that. And there's Brexit for the UK. France has exited the Rugby World Cup.
Yes, they have. Oh, you said that with pain in your heart. Indeed, Les Bleus are out of the Rugby World Cup. It was not a particularly glorious exit either.
Next weekend, we'll be rooting for either Wales or England, right?
Indeed, yes. L'Équipe have gone with the end of an illusion. Their article seems to be basically talking about the fact that, well, they didn't have much chance anyway, which is a little harsh. But they had hit form, in fairness. Midi Olympique, the French rugby paper, goes with claque de fin, which is kind of the final blow. And of course, it was a blow that actually really did for France in that quarter-final. They were playing well, they were leading. And then Sébastien Valmina did this. If you didn't see it at the weekend, there he is, sticking his elbow into the throat of Aaron Wainwright, the Welsh player. To give you an idea of the force, here it is in video format. Some people saying, how did he end up not a quadriplegic after that? I mean, it really was quite a severe blow. Interestingly, Sébastien Valmina has decided to announce that he's retiring from international rugby. I think the likelihood of him wearing the French jersey ever again was pretty small anyway. So he's decided to preempt that, claiming he made this decision months ago. Interesting today, it is actually his birthday. His 28th birthday, not normally the age at which people admit that their international career is over. It normally comes a lot later. So I think we can say without question that that decision was based on that. But he's not the only one who was on the pitch yesterday to be causing controversy. The referee, Jacko Paper, who is South African, was pictured last night with some Welsh fans, and they are imitating that elbow manoeuvre. Some people thought it was funny, some people got quite upset about it. This person says that that gesture is worse than what we saw happen during the match. World Rugby are actually investigating it. And it's interesting to see who's criticising this. Among them, Bernard Laporte, who's a former sports minister, former coach of the national side himself. He's now the president of the French Rugby Federation, and he says it's inconceivable and unacceptable, deserves a heavy penalty because a referee must be exemplary both on and off the field.
All right, blame the ref.
Why not?
All right. Emma James, and we thank the British for introducing us to rugby. Nido Galetti and then Conway Mouret, Emma James, our rest of our panel. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.